In the other book that you got for this series, Strategy in Action, we start off the book by saying, you know, if you just use this mnemonic of 3, 2, 1, it will help you be a more strategic leader. And in our November session, we talked about the 3, which are the 3 questions that any leader should be asking, and everybody in the organization hopefully would be able to answer about anything you're doing. Why are we doing it? How are we doing it? What are we doing? And those of you who are with us saw the Simon Sinek video and the Golden Circle. So those are the 3 questions. We also, in this Introduction to Strategy in Action, talk about 2 paradoxes of leadership, which I won't go into in depth here, but you see them up on the screen, which is basically one paradox that both you and the people you work with need to figure out is that you have to be able to dive into the work, fully immerse yourself, fully engage, fully own it, and also step back from the work. Get some distance. Say, wait, there's a difference between my practice and me. Just because that thing didn't work doesn't mean I'm terrible. It means that thing didn't work. There's a practice there. So you have to be able to step back and help other people get distance on your work. Similarly, another paradox is you have to have the complexity of the work that you're trying to do, and you have to recognize that complexity, but you also have to make things simple enough that people can do them. But you don't want to oversimplify, because then people lose the why and things become compliance exercises, and that never really works out that well for learning. So how do you hold the complexity while simplifying enough for learning? So leaders always have to navigate that too. The last thing we talk about in that introduction is that you need one focus. School systems are very distracting, noisy, lots of things going on sorts of places. And we say you need one focus. It's the instructional core. So what we're going to focus on for this next bit of time together is how do you actually use meetings to really help you focus on the instructional core? And when I say instructional core, what I mean is this little graphic that's up on the screen there of this triangle of students and teachers in the presence of content. The most important part of the instructional core is actually not the corners, but it's the arrows, the interactions. It's the interactions of students, teachers, and content. And then right there at the center of that, you see on that graphic, is the word task. So the thing that we're asking students to do, think about students for a moment, and then we'll translate this up to adult learners. When we go into classrooms, the thing that we're asking students to do is where you see the heart of the instructional core. What are they interacting about? Now, all those other words up on the slide are 7 principles that my colleagues and I wrote in the Instructional Rounds book about the instructional core. I put them up here for your reference, but we're going to focus on the 2 that are in blue, which are about task. Principle 4 is the shortest one. It's only 3 words. Task predicts performance. There's a lot packed into those 3 words. The basic idea is you don't actually need all the fancy assessments that we have. They can be useful for some things, but all you really need to do if you want to predict the performance of, in this case, students, is go look at the tasks that they're being asked to do every day in classrooms. And the idea there is, if you look at those, you can really predict what will they be able to do as a result of being in school. Now, they may bring some other talents with them that'll help them do something different than that, but those tasks will predict their performance quite accurately. The 5th principle is related to that, which is it says the real accountability system is in the task we ask students to do. So when you hear in a classroom students say, how long is that supposed to be? Do we have to fill in this? What are we supposed to do here? They're showing you that principle. They're showing you that they know that the thing that they're accountable for is to do the task the teacher asked. So many times when I'm in classrooms, the questions I hear from students are not about content or understanding. They are about the task. So if you script, what are the questions students are asking? In many classrooms, the majority of those questions, if students are asking questions at all, will be about understanding how to do the assignment the way the teacher wants the assignment done. And they're showing you that principle. So the good news is we can leverage that, because that means that on most days, most students are actually willing to try to do the task that is put in front of them. And so that means the task is a beautiful opportunity for learning. So we're going to focus on those 2 principles. And with that in mind, this is this is one way of thinking about levels of a task. You know lots of other ones. You know Bloom's, I'm sure you know in this room probably half dozen, even more than that, ways of sort of a taxonomy of thinking about levels of task. I share this one because we have performance data that goes with it, these are the 6 levels that are described in the PISA exam. The PISA exam is an international exam that's given to 15-year-olds across the countries that are in the OECD, so economically developed countries, and many other countries also participate. So 15-year-olds, they take it in reading, math, and science. And the PISA has 6 levels. As you see at the bottom there, you've got level 1 is answering questions involving familiar context, where all the information is right there. Level 2 is interpreting and recognizing situations. Blah, blah, blah. When you look at those levels, which levels do you think American 15-year-olds are probably really good at? 1, 3. Okay, so 3 is execute clearly described procedures, including those that require sequential decisions. Right? So you got a procedure, can you do it? Right? So I'm about to show you a really visually numbing graph, but I'll walk you through it, which is a graph of PISA data from 2012, which is the most recent we've got on math. Okay, so here it is. Isn't that beautiful? All right, so here's what it's showing you. All across the bottom are the countries that took the test. The colors are which level they are. So red is actually below level 1. So I'll pop those levels back up here for a second, you can see. So the notion that some tasks would be below level 1, you know what these tasks look like, right? These are the tasks you do not have to use your brain. Coloring tasks, ones where you don't have to engage your brain. So the red is below level 1, you don't have to use your brain at all. Orange is level 1. Yellow is level 2, purple is level 3, and then it goes on up with the dark green being level 6. So these are arranged left to right from the countries that have the highest percentage of students in level 6 to the lowest. All right, so here's the OECD average. Do you think the United States is below the OECD average in mathematics for 15-year-olds or above? Everybody's like, below. Well, don't even waste our time asking that question. All right, so you're right. So the US is below. In reading, it's a little different. We're statistically right on the average, essentially. But in math, we're definitely below. What you can't see quite as well, here's Canada and Australia. I like to use Canada and Australia because often what people will say is, oh, but wait, those countries on the upper end are those Asian countries that, they have dictatorships, they make people do things, or they're racially homogenous. We have all these sort of explanations for why countries might be doing better than we are. Canada and Australia are quite similar. Canada has slipped a little bit, which I take personally because I'm half Canadian and I consider them my people. They were in the top 5 for a while, but they're slipping a little bit, but they're still above us. And Canada is probably the country in the OECD that's most like us in terms of the racial and linguistic and immigration diversity and socioeconomic diversity and political context of all these countries. Canada is significantly above us. So Canada has 35% of the students are level 2 and below. Australia has 42%. The US has over 50% of our students are topping out in mathematics in high school at level 2. So not even the level 3 that you thought we'd be really good at, although we do have a pretty good band of purple there. Over half of American 15-year-olds basically can recite information and feed it back to you. Right? That's what they're really good at. And if you believe my hypothesis that task predicts performance, that means what you would expect to see when you walk into math classrooms are tasks that ask students to do pretty low-level things, which is well documented to be modal math tasks in the United States. We haven't shifted that very much. Right, so that's task predicts performance. So that's kind of getting that in your head for students. All right, now, when I go into classrooms and I'm looking at tasks, there are 5 questions that I ask to observe and analyze the task. The first 3 are bolded because you can do them with video. You don't even have to be in the classroom to do them. So the first 3 are, what's the actual work that students are being asked to do? So this one is asking you not what's on the board as the objective, or when you give the teacher all the benefit of the doubt, what do you think she was trying to do? It's when you look down at the desk, what is the student actually being asked to do? The second one is, what do you have to know in order to engage the task? And the third one, which is a very powerful question, goes back to that instructional core principle, is a prediction question. So if you were a student and you did the task successfully, assume success, assume you did it successfully, what would you know and be able to do? Now, this is a kind of gut check, be honest kind of question. So in most, what that data was telling us is, probably that means in most high school math classes, if you walked in and you asked that question, you would say, well, gosh, this is what most math classes I'm in look like. Well, gosh, the student would be able to take the procedure that the teacher just used and apply it over and over again, as long as the problem looked exactly the way the teacher showed it over and over again. Right? So that's a kind of prediction. The other two questions you have to actually be in the classroom to see, which are, what's the actual product of the task? Or you can collect those and look at them later, but you have to be in there. And then, what's the distribution of performance of students? In any class, there's usually a distribution of how students actually do. The prediction question is asking, assume success, what's the essential ceiling on learning you would expect from having done that task successfully? What would you expect? Right? So these are some questions you can use for observing and analyzing tasks. Useful for looking at students. Now, bringing us back to our topic for today, meetings, also potentially then useful for talking about adult learning. To the earlier point that was made about, well, gosh, meetings should really, meeting agendas should look like great lesson plans, and meetings should look like great classrooms. Right, so we should be able to use these same questions to analyze the tasks in meetings. So let's look at this for a second. One thing, we wrote the Instructional Rounds book now 7 years ago, and my thinking has evolved a little bit. And one of the ways I would, if I got to just wave a magic wand and change the print in all the books, this is how I would change it. I would change out the word student for learner. So instead of saying it's the interaction of students and teachers in the presence of content, I would just take out student and I put learner in, and I would take out teacher and I would put facilitator. And if you think about it that way, first of all, I think that's better for our classroom context, because it says different people can be learners and different people can be facilitators of learning in any context. We're not assigning role by student and by teacher. If you think about it this way, it also lets you apply it at multiple levels of the system. So teachers can be the learners in a situation, and a teacher or somebody else can be the facilitator. Principals can be the learners and somebody else can be the facilitator. You are all the learners in here today, and I am the facilitator, right? So that lets us imagine it across multiple settings and multiple levels of the system. So then when you come back and you think about those three questions and you say, oh, okay, so instead of I say, what's the actual work that students are being asked to do, I just flip out that word and I say, what's the actual work that learners are being asked to do here, right? So just apply those same three questions to your adult learners. So that's what we're going to practice. And I want you to keep these PISA levels in mind, because we don't usually think about this kind of levels in reference to adults. We're so trained to think about student assessments this way, but we don't just think about adults. We think about what level is really happening here for adults. Whatever frame is your frame in your head for thinking about tasks, whether it's Bloom's or something else, think about what level of demand, cognitive demand, am I seeing here in the adult meetings?